find other great podcasts like this one at podmoth.network.
What time is it? Let me check my watch. Oh, it's bone o'clock. In olden days, a glimpse of femur was only for morbid dreamers, but you're not alone. Bring anything bones. Two goofy gals with deathly interest go on a skeleton inquest in your headphones. Anything bones.
Hello and welcome to Anything Bones. I'm Sophie Bone Alone Schwartz.
And I'm Katelyn. Bone in the zone, Katelyn. I mean, oh my god! I couldn't even get my own name right, listeners. I did just wake up from a nap. Good afternoon.
Yeah, at a beautiful 3 p.m., you've just woken up from a nap. Not to expose you.
It's a Sunday. Yeah, it's a Sunday, and everybody needs to take a little nap every once in a while. But we're not sleeping for long because we have a guest, and it's a very special guest because she's back. She's back, baby.
Sam Demboski, back in the house.
Back in the house.
Hell yeah.
Sam was last on this podcast in episode 3 when we were but wee babes.
We little babbies rolling out of the crib.
Rolling out of the grave.
Yeah, exactly. Newly birthed in the arms of our Lord Death. But it was not a podcast at that point. It was a fun recording project that might become a podcast. And Sam lent her wonderful talents to one of our very first episodes. And it's one of our most popular.
Oh, really? Ooh. I was saying, I didn't even have a microphone then.
I'm not sure if we did either. We're like, yeah, we'll just use our computers.
It was straight up, it was just a Zoom recording. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was.
It was, and it sounded like audio dog shit.
Let me tell you about Catacomb Saints into a tin can from 6 feet away.
That is what it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, but I think back on that topic as such a great, seminal topic for the podcast because those Catacomb Saints, they pop the fuck up everywhere. I was researching in Germany for, I think that was the 11,000 virgin bones.
Yes, that one. Uh-huh.
And I kept finding Catacomb Saints, and I was like, God damn it.
Well, we love a relic on this podcast, and I feel like that was one of the first.
Yeah.
Anytime you put bones on display.
I love it. Bone churches are our bread and butter.
Our bone and bonter.
Our bone and our bonter.
Bone and bonter. How can we get more bones in 2 words?
I don't know. Bone and bonter is our bed and breakfast out in the country where we secretly kill people.
Oh, God. We get a murder castle, but it's just a farm and a hotel, and we just... Yeah, that sounds like about right.
It's a really cute sort of like a murder Dutch colonial.
Yeah, it's like true crime cottagecore.
True crimeagecore.
Oh my god, I think you created a new aesthetic.
Oh my god. It's cottagecore, but just everything is a really distressing shade of red.
Yeah.
And everything is real tense.
Everything's tense. Everything's red. There's tarp. Don't know why. No carpets, only
it's like
tarp.
Dexter's house.
Like Dexter's
yeah.
house.
But way more tastefully appointed.
Yeah. It's like Dexter's.
Because it's us.
It's Dexter's house, but instead of that Miami flair, it's sort of like an old country traditional.
Have you seen any of the newest season of Dexter? It's actually really good.
I have not yet. My parents liked it, and then they were about to watch the finale, and we're like, hope they don't whiff it like the finale of the first show. And I was like, was it good?
Seriously?
And she went, no. She was like, no, they
Damn it.
did it dirty again.
I've watched like 7 episodes of it, and it's funny because I did watch it with my parents, and I've just only watched it at their house. So like I wait to get to their house to watch it on Xfinity on demand.
Well, I guess prepare to be disappointed by the end.
Yeah, I mean, I guess how else could you feel after the ending of The Real Dexter?
Yeah,
but prepared to be disappointed.
It wouldn't be Dexter if they didn't just really with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, you can only be a little boy in a lab with an annoying sister for so long.
No, that's Dexter's laboratory, Sophie.
Nice. The other Dexter.
The other Dexter. That's the only one I have experience with. I am, as we know on this show, I'm a weenie for horror stuff. But, But like Dexter, I think we're going to start off with some extremely violent men. How does that sound?
What a beautiful and scary transition.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and do my sources really quickly. We have one from Smithsonian Mag, count them 1, 2, 3 articles from Wikipedia, an article from turkeyhomes.com.
No.
Turkey Homes?
Turkey like the country.
Like the country.
Like the country.
I imagined one that was homes in Turkey, and then I imagined one that was like those fancy dog houses, but for turkeys.
Homes for turkeys.
Homes for turkeys.
You said turkey homes, and I just said no.
Yes. Turkey homes. No. What? Not no.
I cannot abide a housed turkey.
I only want turkeys to be unhoused.
I mean, free range, I guess, but this is homes in Turkey.
Okay, the country.
Yes, not homes for turkeys. So my subject today, when I was looking to find something to talk about, I wanted to talk about buck wild rulers, like monarchs or, rulers of nations who just got up to some absolute bullshit, because we know that they always are, right? We can always count on royalty for bad behavior.
Always.
And so that search brought me to the Ottoman Empire, which has had a few quite buck wild rulers who are sultans. And I was interested in this because I feel like one of the perceptions of sultans that we have growing up is the father of Jasmine in Disney's Aladdin. And
that's my favorite sultan and the only one I know personally.
But how would you
personally?
Yeah, I feel like because I've seen the cartoon and the live Aladdin, I feel like I really know him.
Oh, okay.
Katelyn, since you know him so well, how would you go ahead and describe him?
Please detail your parasocial relationship with the Sultan from Aladdin.
Okay, so in the cartoon, he's very short. I think he's wearing like an all-white outfit with a very large white turban and that big feather.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got. That's all I remember.
But you'd say he has a pretty meek personality.
Well, he's very controlled by Jafar, so yeah.
I would say that this is a extremely inaccurate depiction of sultans.
Nice.
Sultans in the time of the Ottoman Empire were extremely ruthless leaders through their upbringing, released their trauma onto their subjects. Classic. And this resulted in some pretty interesting behavior and a lot of bones.
I'm guessing those bones were former people?
Yes, former people. So let's first talk a little bit about the Ottoman Empire and get familiar with it, because I didn't know so much about it going into it. We've talked a little bit about it on this show, but not in any sort of great detail, I feel. So it was founded in 1299 in northwestern Anatolia, which is now part of Turkey. The Ottoman Empire came to control most of southeastern Europe, Western Asia, and northern Africa between the 14th and early 20th century. It's a long time.
That's a long time.
Yeah. After 1354, the Ottomans crossed over into Europe, and with the conquest of the Balkans, they transformed their empire into a transcontinental empire, and they actually ended the Byzantine Empire with the conquest of Constantinople in 1453. So this empire, as the years go on, only expands further and is becoming an incredible powerhouse in the world at this time. At the beginning of the 17th century, the empire contained 32 provinces and numerous vassal states, including its capital, Constantinople, which is modern-day Istanbul. And you see, Istanbul was Constantinople. Now it's Istanbul, not Constantinople. But why did Constantinople get the works? Well, that's nobody's business but the Turks.
More claps for Sophie.
Thank you.
Always claps for They Might Be Giants.
I thought that it illustrated the point. So, with Constantinople as its capital, the Ottoman Empire was the center of interactions between the Middle East and Europe for about 6 centuries. Again, we're talking about this wide-reaching empire. So you're saying, Sophie, this sounds like an incredible civilization. Who was at the head of all of this? Well, like I said, these sultans. And these men were ruthless, military-minded. I wrote they were blood perverts who were...
Delicious.
But unfortunately, they were crippled by mental illness brought on by the fratricidal traditions of their empire.
I can't wait to hear more about those.
So the Ottoman Empire was an absolute monarchy. And by the second half of the 15th century, the Sultan kind of sat at the top of this entire empire and was in charge of all things political, military, judicial, social, and religious. And their power came from God. Where have we heard that before?
Oh, a lot of places.
Everywhere.
Almost every other kind of ruler loves to say that they were ordained by God. Europe, I'm looking at you.
Yes.
From the largest empire to the smallest cult, everyone thinks God made them leader.
Exactly. So the Sultan was also the supreme military commander and had official title to all land. So if you have land, it belongs to the Sultan.
Like it's yours, but also like it's mine.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's yours, but it's mine.
But it's mostly mine. Yeah.
But it's mostly mine.
You can never get ahead in that system. You're just always going to be in the exact same place that you are.
Exactly. And that is the tone of this whole kind of story of trying to fight against a preordained place. Because we get to, how did you become Sultan in this time? Well, they had basically, instead of it being the eldest son, because we know it's always got to be the sons, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was not the eldest son who got to be the Sultan, but the one who killed all the others.
Jesus Christ.
If you were an only child, it's like, phew, skipped that one. No one to kill.
But there was no birth control, so there were no only children.
That's
Exactly.
True. You'd really have to luck out to be the only one.
Yeah, and this practice, besides being incredibly cruel, had a type of utility to it. It was supposed to prevent, before this practice was put into place, there was a series of civil wars brought on, by multiple heirs vying for the throne. So they put this measure in place so that they could offer stability to the empire without having constant factions. Because as Katelyn said, no birth control. So you're looking at families with between 10 and 20 heirs.
That's a lot of murder. That's a lot of sibling murder.
Yep. Mehmed's law, this fratricidal tradition, resulted in the deaths of at least 80 members of the House of Osman over a 150-year period.
Woo! Dang.
Yeah, there was one sultan, Sultan Mehmed III, that killed all 19 of his siblings to ascend the throne.
What is this, like Hunger Games? They just throw them all into a pit and just see how it goes?
Yeah, kinda.
Like an actual pit?
No, from what I read, when it was time for someone to ascend the throne, whoever got the jump to like send out their assassins, whoever got to it first. Like, you could kill them yourself, but it wasn't against the rules to send a bunch of guys with silk scarves to strangle your siblings.
I see. So it wasn't like a battle royale.
No.
It was more like okay, the Sultan's about to beef it. We gotta start killing our siblings.
Exactly. And that's where there would also be little gaps in reign while these things were getting quote unquote figured out. So you're waiting for someone to emerge on top after the death of the Sultan, and you're just like, who's it gonna be?
Sounds really, really comforting and relaxing.
Fun time to be a peasant.
What a great way to start a rule.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, going back to the original topic, this led to there being some pretty vicious rulers of the Ottoman Empire. One of which was Sultan Selim, who reigned from 1512 to 1520. And in his 8 years of being Sultan, he went through 7 grand viziers, which are his advisors, and ordered 30,000 executions.
What a dick.
Yeah. And so perilous and dangerous was the job of being the vizier that when the vizier would leave their home, they would tuck their will into their robes lest they get killed on that day.
See, that's no way to live.
That's how you get ulcers.
Yeah, that's how you die of stress. Or being killed by the Sultan.
Or you just get fucking murdered.
But literally, there was an expression in that time that persisted for a couple centuries after that was, quote, mayest thou be the vizier to Sultan Selim. May you go get killed and die, by the Sultan. That's how much I hate you. The structure of these executions was very interesting because the job of executioner was actually held by the Sultan's head gardener.
No.
He's really good at pruning.
That is not what he signed up for.
Okay, so I'm going to need you to tend the roses, and then after that, cut that guy's head off.
I love the way you trim the branches on that tree. Do I have a job for you?
Why don't you trim the branches off this guy?
I'd love you to trim my family tree, please. Oh, but really, kill them, for sure.
You are spot the fuck on. Because, so in this time, there was actually, an army of gardeners. There was about 5,000 gardeners, and it was their responsibility to keep up the gardens and also be the bodyguards and executioners of the Sultan.
What a job!
That is a weird listing on Indeed.com.
Must have a green thumb and a red hand.
For some reason, I'm thinking a lot about the little henchmen in Alice in Wonderland that are we're painting the roses red. We're painting the roses red.
Yeah, these were extremely violent and turbulent times. All of these executions were extremely brutal. Women were not treated very well in this time. There are accounts of these gardeners taking condemned women and sewing them into weighted sacks and then throwing them into the sea.
Jesus God.
Yeah, so these gardeners are kind of actually very terrifying.
Gardener is their cover. They are murderers.
Yeah, we call them gardeners, but they're murderers.
I wonder how the gardens looked. Are they really good at that too?
I mean, I'd say maybe a third of them are good at gardening and the rest are great at killing.
Do they divvy it up like that? Do they have the gardeners that really do more of the gardening because that's what they're good at?
I mean, Jeremy's only killed 3 guys this month. He's gonna have to up his quota, but God, his roses look amazing.
Yeah, look at his azaleas are spot on. He had to stab the Sultan's brother 16 times to actually get him to die, but his hedges are impeccable.
Yeah, chef's kiss on that one. Well, performance varies. But, in these times, it was not always a lock that you would be killed. There were, if you were a high enough ranking official, there was a way that you could get out of your execution.
You just yell time out.
It's almost as good as that, because basically what happened was that you would get a chance to race the head gardener, and if you got to the end of the race before him, you were not killed.
Oh,
Like a
boy.
foot race.
Yeah,
Oh, that sucks so hard.
right? It super does.
This is you've avoided your siblings' assassins. You get to the palace and the gardener / murderer is there and it's like, you want to race me, bro?
Yeah, it's you have to race me, bro.
Okay.
And you know, for most high ranking officials, because this was for viziers and like nobles of the time, if you were just a normal ass thief, you were fucked. Sorry. Your head's going on the gate. I'm sorry. But for the grand viziers, sometimes you would get fed poisonous sherbet by a group of young muscular men.
What a way to go, honestly.
Honestly.
I was just gonna say, if that's how you're gonna go, that's how you're gonna go.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty good. Or you would be challenged to this foot race. And
And you lose the race and you're exhausted and they just kill you right there.
yep.
If only they gave you the sherbet after. It'd be a nice palate cleanser after such a hard event.
Yeah. A little bit of refreshment before you beef it. So this is how it would go down. The condemned man would be allowed to run as fast as he could, the 300 yards or so from the palace, through the gardens, down through the fish market, and to the southern side of the palace complex, which was like overlooking this waterway that was right by the palace, and that was the place of execution. If you could get there before the head gardener, your sentence was commuted to banishment. You had to get out of town, but you weren't going to get killed. If the other guy was there waiting for you,
Fucking run off the cliff because you're done.
well, if the guy was there waiting for you, they would behead you and then chuck your body into the sea.
God, Jesus, this is such a brutal thing.
You imagine being a fish seller in that market and suddenly some really well-dressed dude goes fucking hoofing it by and you're like, they're at it again.
I just imagine a guy like hucking it through Pike's Place Market, like being like, out of my way, out of my way, out of my way, getting slapped in the face by fish and tourists. So I have a question. When do you think what year do you think the last time that they did this was?
1400s?
I'm gonna say 1864.
Ooh, Sam is the closest, 1822.
Wow. Good job, Sam.
I
Yes.
knew it was going to be comically late.
Yeah. After a while, this law of fratricide was like, it ensured you got the most ruthless sultan, right? But it didn't exactly prepare people to ascend the throne, living their entire life in fear. So they decided to come up with a better solution, which was from about 1600, generations of Ottoman royals would actually be imprisoned in little rooms, sometimes for several decades, until the appointed heir was ready to ascend the throne, and then they would either banish them or kill them.
Huh. They sort of went from a battle royale to like veal cows.
Yeah. And it definitely resulted in decline in mental state for all of the sultans after that, because as you can assume, being trapped in a room with, you got to get visited by concubines, which was nice, but basically all they would do is hang out with concubines and do macrame.
Is that where macrame comes from? I've never actually known the origin point of macrame before like the 1970s.
I mean, it's gotta be.
Hey guys, future Sophie here. I'm just popping in to let you know that macrame is old as balls, you guys. So it can be traced back all the way to the Babylonians. The word macrame might be derived from the Arabic meaning striped towel, ornamental fringe, or embroidered veil. So yeah, macrame is very old.
That's what they did, though. They did macrame, which is a grandma's craft.
Yeah, but I mean, when the concubines come over, it's just all plant hangers, every corner of the room.
The first 20 minutes with the concubines is showing them the new stuff that you've made out of macrame.
Yeah.
It's like, and then I got this wall hanging, and I made this plant hanger, and then I made this rug. Anyway, do you want to have sex? But as I said, this brutal imprisonment made for some brutal rulers. One of my favorites is Murad IV, who ruled from 1612 to 1640. And he was an extremely talented and efficient military ruler, but he also had a penchant for random acts of murder. One of his favorite things to do was to dress up in disguises and wander the streets of Constantinople with his executioner, ordering killings on the spot of anyone who he thought was a troublemaker. And then later in his life, he would do it just for fun.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that's a real ideal afternoon, my dude.
Once one of his musicians was playing a Persian melody, and it upset him so much that he had his head cut off.
Imagine being so upset by music that you do that. Like, you have to be so fucked up.
I mean, he literally lived in a cage for most of his life.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah. A lot of these rulers ended up being extremely vicious people. This man that we're talking about, his younger brother drowned 280 concubines because he thought that they were plotting against him.
Jesus God. And they kept sending in concubines?
This was a mass drowning.
This is bad.
It's pretty
hear
bad.
me frown.
Yeah, you are frowning about as hard as I've seen you. But I will end my little segment with two sultans who were not as vicious.
Not as vicious. Only 140 concubines got drowned this time.
Hey, I mean, for that, however some many difference of concubines, that's pretty significant.
That's a 50% reduction.
One that I would like to talk about is Mustafa, who reigned from 1592 to 1639, and he went into his royal cage at the age of 11 and was put on the throne at the age of 25. He had a practice of appointing people to high-ranking positions who were incredibly unqualified. He met this farmer on the road once when he was out just on like a ride on his horse, and the farmer was like, "Hey, do you want a drink?" And he's like, "Hell yeah, farmer, do you want a job?" And was like, made him a high-ranking official.
Things are so different these days in the professional field.
I don't know, failing upward is a real phenomenon even now.
But if it was this easy, I would be hanging on my street corner with a 30 rack of LaCroix, offering every dude in a suit a nice refreshment. But unfortunately, because of his bad choices in advisors, he was put back in his cage. And
Oh no!
And he had these two servant girls who would just hang out with him, and reportedly all he did all day was like hang out and joke around with his two gal pals. And when his nephew, who they had given power to when they imprisoned him the second time, beefed it, they were like, "Hey, do you want to come be sultan again?" And he was like, "No, I'm going to stay in the cage with my gal pals."
Good choice. Good choice.
Yeah, and he has the legacy of being called the giggling one. Because he just sat and laughed with his gal pals. And then the last sultan I want to talk about is maybe my favorite sultan. This is Mehmed IV, and he was known as like a pious man. He was very religious, but unfortunately he was not great in the military field, and he suffered an extremely humiliating defeat by the Zaporans Cossacks. And after this battle, Mehmed was like, "I am going to send them a letter and be like, hey, you better submit to me because I'm the Sultan." And when his opponents got the letter, they fucking laughed and refused and sent him back a letter that dunked on him so hard that he never recovered. And I will read you some of the things that they said about this.
Yes! I want to hear it!
So in this letter, they wrote that what the devil excretes, his army eats. And And further calling him a Babylonian scullion, Macedonian wheelwright, brewer of Jerusalem, goat fucker of Alexandria,
That's mean.
That's incredible.
swine herder of Greater and Lesser Egypt, pig of Armenia, Poldian thief, catamite of Tartary, hangman of Kamenets, and fool of all the world and the underworld, an idiot before God, and grandson of the serpent.
How many of them do you think they got together in a room to be like, we need a list of places and we need a list of insults and we're just gonna start pairing them up?
I mean, when I say he, didn't recover from this, this was the beginning of, the decline of this empire.
Oh no.
Yeah, there's no coming back from that. You are a puddle on the ground after that.
You're the goat fucker of Alexandria.
I know when
That one was my favorite.
that's everybody's favorite.
I mean, I do enjoy grandson of the serpent.
Yeah, that was a weird way to end it, though.
I know,
True.
right? It's not really I feel like that was a downgrade after Goat Fucker of Alexandria.
Yeah, if we had ended on Goat Fucker, I think the whole thing would have ruined him even more.
Yeah,
Exactly.
good button. That's a great button.
Yeah. But like I kind of said, the reputation of the Sultan never really recovered from this, and it kind of showed surrounding areas that these sultans could be beat, they could be humiliated. And even though this was such a wide-reaching civilization and empire, it was led by such unstable people that ultimately led to its decline. But those were some buck-wild sultans that I wanted to present to you.
Wow, nice job.
Thank you.
I mean, buck wild is the only appropriate term.
Yeah, the first thing I found about that was the foot race for your life, and I was like, I have to learn more about this.
How did that come up in Google? What were you searching for?
I was searching for gamified justice, actually. I was thinking about how you do RPG games, and I was thinking about, death and games, and so I found that through gamified justice.
That would be an incredible game name.
You can have it for your Twitch stream.
For my Twitch.
But that is the end of my bone topic.
Bones!
Well, from sultans to something completely different. Sam, what do you have for us today?
I mean, it's a whole different set of maniacs, really. Just sort of a different kind.
We love maniacs on this show.
Where can I meet these? I try to be authentic in my research, and that does involve, in this case, getting information from actual creation science sources.
Oh,
and
no.
Boy, did I have to take this in a lot of little bites, because there's only so much you can read before you're like, I gotta watch a movie. I cannot deal with these people anymore.
I gotta read something that a person with a brain wrote.
Yeah, and I need to watch anything without an agenda. Anything. So yeah, this story is about creationism and the creationist explanation for fossils, because the fossil record is such a big part of, evolution and that theory. It's well, what do these guys have to say about it?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm so here for this.
Me too. I really want to know how you explain away these things.
Well, the funny thing is that it was incredibly hard to come up with just a sort of list of ideas that make up the theory, because so much of creation science, really the entirety of it, is just looking at what science has established and being like, nuh-uh. So there are no sort of original ideas. There are only reactions to what science has said, because it's just pseudoscience trying to back up an idea that they've already decided is correct.
Ooh, that's not good science.
That's very bad science. You might call it not science at all.
What?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's crazy.
I know, it's wild. For my sources on the creation science end of things, we have answers in Genesis, which refreshingly is one of the blatantly named ones instead of the sort of insidiously named ones that are trying to sound like a scientific thing, but actually aren't.
Ooh.
Just come click on this dinosaur. We won't try to tell you everything you learned is wrong.
Yeah. Welcome to the Geoscience Research Institute. We're definitely not an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventists.
Oh, that's tricky.
Yikes.
And we've got the Twin Cities Creation Science Association and the Institute for Creation Research. And those were the big places that I got, what do you call them? Lies from. You know those things?
Your misinformation?
My misinformation.
They're bullshit.
There was another site I found that was actually kind of interesting called BioLogos, which is a Christian site, but the entire thing is actually like wrapping Christianity and science together instead of the whole point being like negating one.
So like God created evolution? Kind of like...
Yeah, more like that. Like there's ample evidence to say that everything in science exists, and it's more like God made that. Okay. But all of this other stuff is still valid, kind of a thing. So that was a refreshing change from the rest. And then as far as actual science information sources, I have Smithsonian Magazine, Britannica, an article from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Socratic.org, and the National Center for Science Education.
Those valid sources soothe my soul.
Right? I put them at the end of the list because I needed a sort of a refreshing palate cleansing sherbet from the poisonous sherbet of the previous course.
I noticed, though, that you didn't get any information from turkeyhomes.com.
I did not. I didn't. I went straight to the one that was just homes for turkeys, and it turned out there wasn't anything useful, so I ended up just sort of ditching the whole thing.
More misinformation.
Well, I'm pretty sure all turkeys believe in evolution, so...
That's true. Turkeys are Darwinists.
Absolutely. I have talked to many a turkey in my day. They believe soundly in the scientific method, for sure. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Never met a turkey without a hypothesis.
And the evidence to back it up.
Amen.
So first off, what is creationism? Just in case anyone isn't sure. And I just went with the Merriam-Webster says... You know, I'm going to do this like a graduation speech.
Yeah.
Creationism is a doctrine or theory holding that matter, the various forms of life, and the world were created by God out of nothing, and usually in the way described in Genesis. And that usually in the way described in Genesis is kind of where we have our offshoots, because there is old earth creationism versus young earth creationism. And your old earth creationism acknowledges the sort of million years of history, but then says at the beginning it was in fact God that created everything, versus young earth creationism, which is Genesis is a literal historical depiction of the creation of the earth, which makes it about 6,000 years old.
Boo.
And that is fact.
Boo.
So ridiculous.
And the funny thing is that young earth creationists are just as disdainful of old earth creationists as they are of like secular people in other religions.
That's so wild. Well, I guess that's why there are sects, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the entire purpose of creation science is an attempt to defend the Bible as the literal word of God and fact. They're going at all of this with the explicit purpose of just defending that. It's entirely antagonistic from go, for sure.
We love that.
And it is worth noting both of those groups don't believe in evolution. Even the old earth creationists don't actually believe in the theory of evolution. And then there are the Christians who incorporate the belief that like God created everything and then it sort of went from there. And that's where you incorporate like evolution, evidence of evolution as part of that process.
Interesting.
That one seems fine to me.
That one's one of those where like we're getting so far back, I can't even really like find the energy to argue about the very beginning. Like, I'm just not gonna bother with that. As long as we agree on like the big shit in the billion years leading up to now, I feel like we can get along fine.
It's like, it's so-and-so billion years. God said, let there be bones.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay.
Okay, fine.
That's fine. Even though there weren't bones at the start, but that's okay.
Oh my god, can you imagine Adam and Eve without bones?
It wouldn't have worked. There would be no Eve because she was created from Adam's rib.
Oh, see, these are the things I don't know.
Right?
I don't know.
Isn't that a thing?
I think that's part of it.
There's something with a rib.
Yeah.
Ribs.
Delicious. Applebee's.
The Garden of Eden is just Applebee's.
I mean, they have great ribs.
They have an Applebee's.
Apple, please.
We're cracking this thing wide open.
It sounds to me like Applebee's is a satanic creation, is where I'm going with this.
It sounds like Applebee's does not believe in evolution.
Applebee's is Satan's favorite fast casual eating spot.
It's probably true. Aren't they the ones with like the 99-cent margaritas or something awful like that?
That sounds like Chili's, but I have no idea. It's been
It might
it's
be
been a minute
Chili's.
since I've been in either restaurant.
Good for you.
All right, let's get back to these creationists.
Yeah, anyway, we've outlined the perpetrators.
It's Applebee's.
Applebee's. Spoiler. God, that was on page 4, and now I just have to skip the rest.
Oh, shit, I'm sorry, Sam.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We'll fix it in post. Okay, so now let's see what Oxford Languages defines creation science as, because that one I just went with a dictionary one too. The interpretation of scientific knowledge in accord with belief in the literal truth of the Bible, especially regarding the creation of matter, life, and humankind in 6 days. A very nice summary.
Yeah, geez, 6 days. That's quick.
That's super fast. Creation science is specifically a mutant offshoot of young Earth creationism. They're the only ones with the use for it. One of the big sources that I got these ideas from was Answers in Genesis, which is, and I'm pulling, I feel like the whole of creation science is really summed up well in just a couple of quotes from this website. They describe themselves as an apologetics ministry dedicated to helping Christians defend their faith and proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ. Okay.
Oh, no.
They are the parent ministry of the Creation Museum, if you've heard of the Creation Museum.
Yes.
And Ark Encounter, which is like a full-size replica of Noah's Ark in northern Kentucky. Mm-hmm. They have their own research journal.
Oh.
No.
You can hear the quotes
Noah
around that
doesn't
shit.
need that.
But here, this couple of sentences just says everything about what creation science is and is about. And this is from a section called Turning Secular Science into Creation Science. We don't have to abandon all the work of secular scientists. We can often co-opt their work into a biblical worldview. I could now walk into any museum and, exercising caution and discernment, imagine how some of the reconstructed scenes could have been part of Noah's world. Like I don't know. I stared at this paragraph for so long because I couldn't figure out if they knew exactly what they were saying and if they knew who it sounded. Like, do they understand the implications of saying co-opt?
I mean, yeah, that's so bold to say the word co-opt. Like,
It's
to use
very
that
bold.
on your own fucking website. Like,
Yeah.
Batshit.
I looked at it for so long and then I was like, I gotta watch Paranormal Activity. I can't do this right now.
amazing.
Yes, so I highlighted reactionary. I think we've gone over that. And then they also really like to take the same sort of view as other pseudoscience anti-science movements, which is responding to assertions that have never been made. So like they have a whole thing about how fossils can actually form really quickly. Fossils don't take millions of years to form. Well, nobody says fossils take millions of years to form. The actual like definition of a fossil is like 10,000 years or older. But it's one of those, it's so insidious because it is very much like, and you can see from sort of the phrasing and the tone in a lot of these resources that it's for believers that like need more convincing. It's like, don't go to other places, stay here and we'll give you the answers. Because the tone of a lot of it is very much like, we know what the right answer is. Here's what here's what these secular people think, but we know better than that.
It's so interesting because I feel like it's with and almost also in opposition to the quote that you just shared about like how you can take science and co-opt it for your own like purposes, how you might go into a museum and like imagine that like, you know, this was like part of like Noah's whatever. It seems like they're almost admitting that like the science is right, but you shouldn't believe it, and here's why.
It's like, here's propaganda to arm yourself with.
Yeah.
For when you are exposed to other ideas.
Well, it's so, like, I think you said, did you say this word, or reactionary?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
It's so
I highlighted it.
Yeah, because it's so charged before you have even had a chance to respond. You're just like, whoa, what am I hearing? It's like someone trying to be sound smarter than they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because then you get into the actual sort of substance of arguments, and it's usually science says this thing, but we know that's not true because the Bible says this thing. Like, that really is the extent of the argument. And there are some people who try ever so slightly harder to deceive you, ultimately. It's still deception. Okay, so the big thing, because we're talking about fossils, because we got it as bones.
Yeah.
So according to creation science, where do fossils come from? Verbatim from Answers in Genesis. Throughout the world's rock layers, there are billions of fossils, the remains of organisms that were catastrophically buried largely during the global flood with a capital F, which they are placing at 2348 BC.
Is that Noah's flood with the ark?
Yes. Yeah.
Ugh.
The assertion is that, I guess not all fossils, because you did have a few thousand years before that to make a couple, but the claim is that the majority of them are organisms that died during the global flood of the aforementioned Noah and his boat of tricks.
Cool. And so we're just ignoring like all of our scientific methods to date these fossils from way before that.
Oh yeah, well we'll get into the complaints that they have about radiocarbon dating.
Okay. That's wild that so all of these animals drowned and then became fossils.
Yeah.
All at the same time.
They think it actually makes more sense that these were all buried at the same time than that it happened over millions of years.
Oh yeah, that makes so much more sense.
Well, we can go here. We'll go to the direct thing that applies to that before we get to the radiocarbon dating, which is the ecological zonation theory.
Zonation?
Ecological zonation theory. They put theory on the end because they think it makes it sound like science.
Sure.
Because no one in these fields that like we're referencing thinks that any of this is theory. They're all coming at it from the perspective that the Bible is correct and we just have to defend that. So
yeah,
they're very one note.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
Because a theory is something that can be disproven, right? Whereas
even like the most sort of settled on scientific concepts are still referred to as theories.
Like gravity.
Yeah, it's kind of just a thing in science that, like, as soon as you assert that something is absolute, you've kind of missed the point of science entirely. So even though all of the evidence that we have points to gravity, to a point where you could say gravity absolutely exists and we've proven it, you still end up calling it a theory because there's always more investigation to be had. So they threw on theory for fun.
I shouted to say this, but leave room for Jesus.
Leave room for future knowledge.
Leave room for Jesus theories, but they need to be fact-based.
Leave room for Jesus's peer-reviewed study.
Leave room for Jesus, who is fact, because the book said so, is kind of it. But the ecological zonation theory, and this is a direct quote from the Geoscience Research Institute, which is the Seventh-day Adventist, surprise. Every once in a while, they move away from Judgment Day predictions and look at the past.
That's fun.
Isn't that really branching out? Move on from our biblical numerology to determine that the papacy is the Antichrist and talk about some fossils.
Gotta mix it up.
Gotta mix it up. In a global flood, the lowest surfaces would be expected to be covered first with water and sediment. Since the lowest surfaces are the ocean floors, we would expect to find marine fossils to form before terrestrial fossils. As the ocean floors were covered with sediment, we might expect to find fossils of species from low-lying terrestrial areas, followed by fossils of species from higher elevations. This theory was first proposed by Harold W. Clark and is called the ecological zonation theory. So their explanation for the layered nature of fossils is that the ocean's already, that's ocean. It's already ocean. So at the bottom, you got the oceany things. And then as everyone else got washed off of their land masses, they sort of stacked up on top of each other. And that's how you get an explanation for the progression of fossils in the fossil record.
Like a death lasagna at the bottom of the sea?
Like a petrified tiramisu. Sort of all hanging out.
Sorry, the way that is written is wild, because if you didn't have like a further knowledge of like how fossils were formed and everything, and you came across this, like the way that it is written could convince someone of this, like who didn't have prior knowledge.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Almost,
Mm-hmm.
if you didn't know more about fossils.
Yeah, and they think that this is supported by a thing called the Cambrian explosion.
Which is a real thing.
That's a real thing. That is, Britannica explains as the unparalleled emergence of organisms between 541 million and approximately 530 million years ago.
It was a fun, sexy time.
It was a fun, sexy time. But what part of the explanation for that is that oxygen levels had gotten to a point in the atmosphere where larger, complex animals could exist, and that higher oxygen levels facilitated metabolic processes that produce collagen, which is a protein building block that forms up hard structures in the body. So you have this sudden explosion of fossils and organisms and the remains of them, because there are finally the hard structures that can be preserved for you to find later. And then at that point, most organisms were living in sort of like the shallower areas of the world's oceans. Like there wasn't life on land. So it was all there anyway. Land organisms develop after that. And then according to creation science, they all just kind of got sloshed
in
together at the same time.
Perfect. Yummy. Good soup.
And creation science claims that the Cambrian explosion cannot be explained by evolutionary theories.
But that's wrong.
It is wrong. We know it's wrong because of things like radiocarbon dating. Well, what does creation science have to say about radiocarbon dating?
Probably nothing good.
Do we need a list of the kinds of fossils? I have one. But we know what fossils are. Okay, we'll go through it really quick. And this list is from Socratic.org. You have petrified fossils, which are created when mineral-rich water fills the spaces in an organism's remains, which is how you get, your big bony skeletons are going to be petrified fossils. You have molds, where shells or other structures were buried in sediment and then they dissolve, and you have your fun little mold left over.
Those are so pretty.
They're very pretty. Then you have casts, which are a mold got filled with minerals. And then you have a fun little buddy made out of rock.
And then you have a rock friend.
you have carbon films, which is where, and this is where you can see the preservation of really delicate structures. You see it a lot in like fish in shale, where
Yeah.
pressure just squeezes out the liquids and gas. And then all you're left with is that like film of carbon.
Kind of a pressed flower of a fish.
Yeah, a pressed flower. That's a very good image. That's perfect. You have preserved remains, which are stuff in like your mammoths in your permafrost and your mosquitoes in your amber and your La Brea tar pits, where like almost the entirety of an organism is preserved rather than just remnants of it. And then you have trace fossils, which are indirect evidence, which is stuff like animal tracks, animal burrows.
Poop? Coprolites?
Coprolites, exactly, was the next word on the note.
Poopy! Old poopy!
Dung or stomach contents. And then gastroliths, which are stomach stones for grinding food that some extinct reptiles used, which I think is the same thing that chickens do now. Like birds, they'll like eat a little bit of gravel, and like gravel helps shake things up.
Birds are weird.
Birds are weird.
Caitlin, what do you think, birds?
Yeah, I don't get them.
And then all of these fossils are formed in sedimentary rock instead of igneous rock. And the third one, what's it called?
Wow, I really should know it, but I don't.
Yeah, I just looked at these words. The igneous one is the one formed by like lava, formed into igneous rocks. The other one is rocks formed by pressure, like extreme pressure. And then there's sedimentary, which is your layers of dirt and organic materials and things that then get pressed together into a rock.
So why do I want to say non-sedimentary?
Because technically it's true.
Yeah, there are rocks that are not sedimentary rocks. They're non-sedimentary rocks.
Okay, so now we get into the biggest thing that creation science really tries to poke holes into in order to invalidate the fossil record and evolution is radiocarbon dating, which is a method used to date fossils and other items. Like you'll use it to date anything with carbon in it.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I can't wait to go on a date with carbon. Got him.
Yes, you did. You got him. I'll see carbon at the Applebee's.
For a sinful date.
Ooh, yeah, for their sinful chocolate cake.
Sinful chocolate cake and the baby back ribs of Adam.
That's my ideal meal, though, TBH.
It does sound pretty good. I think I'm hungry.
Me too.
But anyway, radiocarbon dating is based on the idea that solar radiation turns nitrogen-14, which is in the atmosphere, into carbon-14, which is incorporated into the carbon cycle and becomes part of an organism or anything else containing carbon by exposure to air or like the food that you eat. And that process, like that carbon-14 is replenished as long as an organism is alive or exposed to air. And then as soon as they are dead and buried under stuff, carbon-14 is no longer accruing. And the entire time in this process, carbon-14 is decaying back into nitrogen-14, but just as something is alive and exposed to air, it keeps replenishing itself. Well, it dies. The carbon-14 starts reverting back into nitrogen-14 via beta decay. And that happens at a regular rate. So measuring the remaining levels of carbon-14 in a fossil shows you how old it is up to about 50,000 years.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Because carbon-14 has a half-life of 5,730 years, which is half-life is the amount of time that it takes for half of the existing atoms to decay back into nitrogen-14, and then it halves again, it halves again, it halves again. But calculating off of that and knowing carbon-14 levels in the atmosphere and in different organisms at different points in time, you can then gauge how old something is.
Yeah, and this is an established, extremely frequently used tool in science.
Frequently used, well-established, corroborated by other aging methods that we have, like archaeological evidence. We know how old certain civilizations are, so you carbon date something from then and you can help corroborate. Trees are a big corroboration method because you can also gauge very old ages, like thousands of years old, based off of petrified wood compared to current wood. Wood. Specifically, bristlecone pines are a big one because they live very long and they have very regular tree ring growth that you can match up to actual environments that they're in. So you can use them, like older petrified examples of them, along with some other tree species, to corroborate radiocarbon dating of other organisms and fossils.
So the trees, so this is approved by trees.
Yes, tree approved.
How does the Lorax feel?
I feel like the Lorax should be proud of like all the good shit that trees do.
But now, Sam,
Uh-huh.
how do our creationist friends view this form of dating?
Oh, yes. Well, here, let me scroll down slightly. One of them refers to a study that was actually done by two people, Keith and Anderson, in 1963, where they did radiocarbon dating of like living mollusk shells and showed that you could get anomalous radiocarbon ages off of them because of the environments that they live in. So creation scientists point to that and are like, well, they radiocarbon dated this mollusk and it said it was 2,000 years old. So obviously the entire thing is invalid. Well, here's what the National Center for Science Education had to say about it. In 1982, you'll find that a lot of these arguments from them are stuff from like the 60s and 70s, and they haven't really updated it.
Nice, nice.
But what they said about it was, it does discredit the C14 dating of freshwater mussels, but that's about all.
Dunk on him. Got him.
Right? Keith and Anderson show considerable evidence that the mussels acquired much of their carbon from the limestone of the waters they lived in and from some very old humus as well. Carbon from these sources is very low in C14 because these sources are so old and have not been mixed with fresh carbon from the air. So all it did was discount that, but then creation science comes in and takes it and is like, well, it doesn't work here, so it doesn't work anywhere.
Well, that's not really a valid argument.
No. And then creation science also claims, well, there are sources like coal, oil, natural gas, and diamonds that are millions of years old, but they still have traceable carbon-14 in them. So they couldn't possibly be more than 10,000 years old, and everything should be adjusted to less than 5,000 years old to align with Noah's flood. And you're like, okay, well, that was a lot of steps.
Well, that was a long walk.
You're like, I'm exhausted. Why are we still fighting about this?
How did we get here? But there's a reason radiocarbon dating isn't used after like past 50,000 years at the most, because solar radiation and background beta decay is happening all the time. So you get to levels of carbon-14 in fossils that are so minimal, they're within the margin of error for shit that's just hanging around anyway.
Yeah, because like all things, like we were talking in science, like all things, radiocarbon dating is not perfect.
Yeah.
And it can't be used for absolutely everything.
Yeah. At a certain point, the readings you're getting could be carbon-14, or it could be the radiation that's just around all the time anyway.
Yeah. But I mean, science factors in for those discrepancies.
Yeah, that's why they're like, past that point, you know, we can't rely on radiocarbon dating. That's when you do other methods of determining the age of fossils based on other, you know, radiation decay dating from the rocks around and that kind of fun stuff. Then you have creation scientists who claim that, which is initially true, cosmic radiation is now forming C14 1 1/3 times faster than it is decaying. So that's current times. And I believe that 1 1/3 is actually, it's definitely, like, science has corroborated that that beginning bit is true. It is being formed currently more than it is decaying. Well, then creation science takes that and says, so we're just going to extrapolate backwards. There would have been no carbon-14 in the atmosphere at all 10,000 years ago. So we need to adjust all of our ages on everything to less than 5,000 years because the Earth can't be older than that.
Okay. Yeah, whatever you say, guy.
Yeah, whatever you say. But
I feel like you have to twist shit so much to get there.
you have to ignore a lot and then jump straight from A to Z. But they've already decided what Z is. So
Exactly.
it really doesn't matter the letters in the middle to them. I love the alphabet in its order right now.
I'm a fan.
The actual thing that's happening is that levels of carbon-14 fluctuate dramatically, which has been shown over the past 10,000 years, using our great friends, the bristlecone pine, because you can corroborate how old they are based on other factors and then determine based on, that time going by over the growth of the pine, what radiocarbon levels were. And they do fluctuate dramatically over the past 10,000 years. Actually, by comparing carbon-14 levels with, I think I've been saying radiocarbon levels, which radiocarbon is really not the thing. It is it's the measurement, really. But if you compare like radiocarbon ages with tree rings on our best friend, the bristlecone pine, ages before 1000 BC are actually really too young because of the way things line up. And on top of that, bristlecone pines, they use them because they never develop double growth rings in a season, which some trees do, which would make it hard to line up a year to a ring. But they do occasionally miss them. So even they're off, but they're off in a way that makes everything younger than it actually is.
That's fascinating.
Right? These trees, man, doing a good job.
Wow. These trees are tight.
Bristlecone pines, my best friend.
Truly the hero of this story.
The hero of this story, absolutely. Also, in an attempt to discredit radiocarbon dating, we have creationist Thomas G. Barnes, who said this in 1973. Really, in 1973, quoting mid-60s scientists who didn't actually have a great concept of how the Earth's magnetic field worked. But this is another one where this guy claims the Earth's magnetic field is decaying exponentially with a half-life of 1,400 years, takes that, once again extrapolates back and says that proves that the Earth can't be older than 10,000 years, and that the greater magnetic field in the past would mean less carbon-14 in the atmosphere, meaning all of these radiocarbon dates would be too high, too old. When the actual response is that archaeological and geological evidence, part of which comes from baked clay artifacts
Ooh.
in the past few thousand years, will show baked into it essentially is sort of magnetic field strength at the current time.
Ah.
That's interesting.
Right? Those show the fluctuation of the Earth's magnetic field over time, because that also fluctuates, which is one of the reasons that carbon-14 levels fluctuate. And then if you look at bands of paleomagnetism in the mid-oceanic ridges where tectonic plates are formed, and as the ground is formed and then spreads out, you have these bands of magnetism that are reversing polarity, showing that not only does the Earth's magnetic field fluctuate over the history of the Earth, it also at times has actually flipped and then flipped back.
Wow, I did not know that.
No, I didn't either.
It's pretty wild.
That's wild.
And then one of my little favorite anecdotes with creation scientists talking about pre-human or early human skeletons and fossils, because they, of course, assert that there is no such thing as evolution of humans. It's only ever been the humans that we see now. So they try and say, Neanderthals don't exist. These other sorts of pre-human fossils don't actually exist. It's just humans now, but with assorted bone diseases.
No, wrong.
Yeah, they're rickets changes sort of the shape of your skull, and Paget's disease and congenital syphilis, they'll make you shorter and they'll make your skeleton look kind of weird.
There's no disease that completely changes you into a different kind of human.
Yeah.
There's no
But
disease
then,
that does that.
if you acknowledge that, you couldn't claim that Neanderthal man is just Noah's descendants with various diseases.
Oh, of course not. We got to make it line up for Noah.
That's so wrong. No. No. So bad and wrong.
Yeah, but then, we get back to the fact that all of this has a chosen endpoint that they're just trying to assert. It's all about just defending, a literal reading of the book of Genesis, because if you don't take that literally, then you have destroyed the infallibility of the true word of God, and everything else is just ruined too.
Sure, we're just gonna check out everything that doesn't fit.
Uh-huh.
That's the thing. It's like if this world you're building is so fragile that it can be just dismantled so easily, what's going on there?
Yeah.
So that's my summary of creation science in regards to fossils and Noah's great, beautiful flood.
Wow. I'm mad, but good job.
Yeah, that was one of the most wild rides. I think my brain got squished in many different directions. Like, I feel like I learned new scientific concepts, but then it got holes rained on it by these gross misinformations.
Yeah, sort of the acid rain on your beautiful limestone statue. Except if the acid rain just told you that it was making holes, and you're like, I don't see any holes. And they're like, no, the holes are definitely there.
I'm looking at the statue, it's looking real smooth.
The statue's looking great. No. It's full of holes. God said so.
Wow.
God also said that we need to take an ad break.
Let's go.
Do you see what I did there?
Everyone reflect on your religious beliefs during this ad break.
Hello, friends. I'm Taya.
And I'm Sammy.
And we're the hosts of the Offbeat Worm podcast.
Come check us out. We talk about so many things.
Spooky things, silly things, and everything in between. Find our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more.
And we'll catch you on the Offbeat.
See you soon.
Okay, I hope everybody has had a chance to contemplate God and his eternal glory.
Amen.
Yeah, wow. Did we convert over the break?
Oh no!
So I am going to finish things off with something creepy, because how else do we end it? Before I even get out the gate, though, I am going to do a couple trigger warnings for drug use and suicide. So I came to this story by trolling through BuzzFeed Unsolved videos.
Excellent.
Perfect.
And so season 4, episode 3 really inspired me. I looked at an article from Film Daily, the Toronto Star, and Medium, of course. I actually didn't use Wikipedia today, which is like, kind of feels dirty and wrong.
You're a bad girl.
Or is it wrong because it feels so right?
Yeah, wow. Okay.
It's just a new feeling.
What is this feeling?
So I am going to tell you about Canada's 8-day bride. I don't know if either of you have heard of this story before.
No, for a second I heard brine instead of bride, and I went back to the turkey homes.
Yeah, we put a turkey in some liquid for 8 days, and then we cook it. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Goodbye.
Happy Thanksgiving. Have fun at your turkey homes. Gobble, gobble, gobble.
All right, that was great. Bon voyage, you guys.
All right, so the 8-day bride is actually Christina Kettlewell, and she was born Christina Mocon. I think that's how you pronounce her maiden name, Mocon. So she met and fell in love with a veteran named John Ray Kettlewell, but he goes by Jack, so I'm gonna fucking call him Jack.
Yeah.
She and Jack had known each other for 3 years when they got married, and they are important characters in this story. There's also Jack's good buddy named Ronald Berry, who is a professional ballroom dancer.
Oh my, he must be smooth.
And by the way, this is taking place in May 1947. So we're in Canada in the 40s. Shit's getting wild.
Ballroom dancing.
Ronald Berry is an interesting guy. He had a lot of odd jobs, but it never seemed to quite pan out. He did work in construction and insurance a little bit, which will be important later. So table it. So on May 12th, 1947, the two got married, Christina and Jack. Christina's family thought this was a bad idea, So they didn't give them a blessing. So the couple actually got eloped. And Christina's sister in particular was really worried. And she thought that Christina and Jack spent way too much time with this third guy, Ronald.
Okay, interesting.
The sister also believed that Christina was drugged for the several days leading up to her wedding, and she thought she was high during the wedding itself. So it just didn't seem like a good thing all around.
Worrisome.
Yeah.
Well, but now I'm just seeing a whole, if they eloped, then how does the sister know that she was high at the wedding? That's a little bit interesting. I just poked that hole right now. Whoops.
Yeah, was there any, like, history of drug use on either of their parts that would imply that would be attempted?
It's not really in their past, but there is some evidence for drug use. We're just going to get back to it a little bit later.
Okay.
So they got married May 12th, and then on May 17th, they end up going to Ronald's cabin, which you could only get to by boat. And by the way, if you're wondering how many people are on this honeymoon, you'd be correct if you were thinking 3. It was the married couple and Jack's best friend, Ronald. All 3 on this honeymoon.
I'm starting to think that Ronald is more than a friend.
You would probably be right, but nobody knows for sure. So apparently when they get there, Christina is acting very strange. She would kind of go between being really out of it and crying all the time. Ronald also claims that she had a bunch of conversations with him about whether or not Jack was actually in love with her. This is 5 days after their marriage, or their wedding, excuse me. So not a great start.
Mm-hmm.
So we're up to May 20th, and it's the middle of the day because Ronald leaves the house to go sunbathing. But when he comes back, he finds the whole fucking cabin is on fire.
Oh.
Ain't that the way? You go out to sunbathe for 5 minutes and you come back, the whole house is on fire.
And your goddamn remote cabin that you can only get to by boat is ablaze.
Is ruined.
What are the odds?
The sun that you were so leisurely bathing in lit your entire house on fire. That bastard.
It was the sun.
It was the sun.
So Ronald finds Jack, really out of it inside the house. John has a head wound, and he's not doing so good. So Ronald has to, physically take him out of the burning cabin. And while he's in there, he apparently looks for Christina, but he doesn't see her. And so he's concerned that Jack needs to go to the hospital. Like I said, he has a head wound. And so they dip out to the boat so they can get to a car so they can get to the hospital. And apparently the cottage burns down in about an hour. So, whoa.
Yeah, wow.
So where's Christina? I know we're all dying to know. And unfortunately, that was a poor choice of words because we do find her 150 feet from the cottage in 9 inches of water. And she was dead.
Whoa.
So her body was discovered by a neighbor who was watching the cottage just be on fire. And he was just like, yeah, I'm loving this.
Yeah, I'm loving
Sheila,
this.
get the marshmallows. The cottage is on fire.
Hey, remember that cottage I thought was ugly and I always hated? Guess what happened today?
So he's walking along the beach and he finds Christina face down and she's only in a nightgown. And this is alarming and bad to begin with. But what's really weird is that he is finding Christina after the first responders have been there. And they actually would have had to go past her to get water to try to put the fire out. So it's very suspicious that the first responders or the firefighters, whatever, didn't see her body, but this neighbor guy did. So some people think that maybe she was placed there, in between when the first responders were fighting the fire and when this guy discovered him, I guess. Who knows?
That's certainly strange.
And Jack is of no help at all because he apparently has no recollection of being hit on the head. And they do find codeine in his system. Codeine is an opioid. So codeine is also found when they do an autopsy on Christina, but they don't find any signs of burning, bruising, or any kind of assault, and they ultimately rule her cause of death as drowning. And remember, she's found in 9 inches of water.
But she wasn't burned at all, so it wasn't like she was running out of the house to put herself out.
Apparently not. So after Jack is discharged from the hospital, he gets interviewed by the police for like 3 hours. And then I guess around the same time or afterwards, the police are also getting Ronald's statement, and they interview him for like 13 hours. And apparently Ronald's statement, one source said the police described his statement as brilliant, but BuzzFeed Unsolved said fantastic. So it's one of those words.
In what way, I guess, is my big question.
Yeah, what's fantastic about it, you motherfucking freaks?
Was he particularly eloquent or very cooperative, or did he just give a great performance? Like,
we just don't know.
Solid beginning, middle, and end? Was it the narrative structure?
Yeah, he told a really, really good story.
He's a professional ballroom dancer. He can really
spin a yarn.
Yeah, there you go. That's what it was. So this case actually gets a lot of media attention, and Jack and Ronald, there are pictures of them like going to this inquest because the police were trying to figure out like, what do we do about this? We need to have an inquest. And Jack and Ronald are photographed going to this inquest, and like people are trying to get their autographs. Like that's the level of celebrity that they had reached.
Uh-oh.
Now, I'm just going to tell you right now, because I don't want to leave you in suspense, the inquest does not come to any kind of definitive conclusion about what happened to Christina. Basically, there wasn't enough evidence for or against foul play, so they were just like, yeah, they were just like, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to interpret this, so we're not going to do anything.
How very police of you.
Yes. Yeah, isn't that nice? Of course, there are theories about what happened, and there are 2 big theories, and I'm going to just go through those. So the first theory is that Christina may have had more like nefarious intentions than she let on, or potentially she had some kind of undiagnosed mental illness. And so in this theory, she commits suicide. So there are suicide notes that are found during this inquest. And really weirdly, Ronald, all of the letters are addressed to Ronald. And he somehow like had them with him on the honeymoon, but he grabbed them out of the burning house and was like, yeah, I need my letters from Christina.
That stinks to me.
It's gonna get even stinkier.
Yeah, I would wonder about like I know it's not court approved in any sense because it's not that infallible, but like I wonder what sort of a basic handwriting comparison would give you between these notes and like shit that she's written before.
There was handwriting analysis that was done, and it was determined to be her. And in one of the letters, I think they're all, except for the very last one, they're all addressed to Ronald. So in the first letter that they find, it's right before she apparently gets engaged. And she is talking about, like, she wants to poison herself. And she thinks, quote, "This will be the best way out, as I cannot bear the thought of another girl having him." It doesn't make sense. They're engaged and she's all concerned that she's not the right person for him or she's jealous. It's really unclear in this theory what the intentions are. And maybe that's part of why it's kind of a good theory, is because this would only have to make sense to Christina. It probably isn't meant to make sense to somebody else.
Yeah, that's, when you're in that type of place, sometimes you don't think in a type of logic other people would understand.
Yeah.
Or there's a history of his behavior with other people that we just don't know about.
Exactly.
Yeah, true. So Jack is not confessing to anything. He also says that he didn't even know that she was suicidal. He had never seen these letters before, allegedly. But one of her letters also included like notes about not just wanting to kill herself, but kill Jack too.
Oh.
Which is really like, ooh. The last letter that we have access to was addressed to her former landlady. And I'm like, why are you sending your former landlady this, like, note? But maybe they were friends too. I don't know. One part of the letter says, quote, Ronald, is in the boat outside somewhere. By the time he gets back, everything will be all over with. He must be afraid something would happen because he is staying an extra day to make sure we go back to Toronto with him. So this leads people to believe that Ronald isn't on their honeymoon because he's being a creep. He might actually think that something's going to go down and maybe he's trying to protect one or both of them. So just a theory within a theory.
No, but that's really interesting because that reframes it as, you know, maybe they're not a polyamorous triad and there's actually something more dangerous happening.
Maybe he's the only one that either of them actually talk to.
Yeah.
It kind of seems like that.
Yeah, she goes to him and is like, can you tell Jack this thing? And then Jack goes to him and is like, can you tell her such and such? And Ronald's like, I'm just going to go sit in a boat.
Yeah.
Their marriage is just one big game of telephone with Ronald.
Oh, boy.
Ronald's like, I want 5 minutes to myself. I'm going to go out in the boat and I'm going to do a little sunbathing. What can happen in that time? He comes back, the whole thing's on fire. He's like, oh, God damn it. You did it again, Ronnie.
I left for 5 minutes. My damn house is on fire.
My cottage.
So there are some newspaper reports from this time that paint a stranger picture of Christina than even we've already got. And these reports, I just want to say up front, this is maybe not to be trusted, but it is an interesting, like, notion of what else happened. So newspapers report that Christina was inside the cottage when the fire was going on. And Ronald did actually see her, and she had like tears in her eyes and she was really upset, and Jack had this head injury. And so Ronald takes Jack outside, you know, to try and save his friend who's injured, and Christina's just crying. So it's like, well, let's deal with the physically injured one first. But then apparently when Ron comes back into the cottage, he can't find Christina, can't find any kind of weapon or anything. He's like, what the fuck? Apparently he goes and finds these letters that Christina wrote him because they're important.
That's a priority, I guess.
So basically, newspaper reports say at this time that Christina tried to kill Jack, set the cottage on fire, and then killed herself. But this is like not really in line with earlier statements, and so this is just kind of a weird thing. But it does line up with what she said in her suicide note about wanting to also kill Jack.
Yeah, it's hard to think of what to believe in all of this, because we know there's a lot of cases where the journalism around it is sensationalized, you know?
Of course, yeah.
And it does seem like with that narrative, you have that change from his statement of like, he came in, like she was there instead of her not being there when he came in, but there's no theoretical...
It's such a shift.
There's no reason based on what happens after for him to lie about her being there when he got there.
And then what? She just drowned herself in 9 inches of water after all this? Like, okay.
I mean, you can drown in a very small amount of water. That's possible.
Yeah, and I
like,
guess if you're on drugs, that could also, you know, lead to an accidental death or makes, you know, drowning yourself easier. I mean, that's horrible to think about, but you know what I mean?
I mean, if you've taken a lot of codeine, which is, you know, opiates are a depressant, and you run out of a fire and head down 150 feet and then fall over on a beach, if you land face down in water, I don't know.
I guess you're stuck there.
That's just so many steps.
Yeah, it does.
One of my biggest questions is, like, what was around her body?
Nothing, apparently.
Like, no tracks or anything?
They didn't say. I mean, it's
okay.
But yeah, there was no information about that. But that's an
that would be my
I wonder
biggest
about that.
question.
Yeah, maybe because of the fire and all of the like first responders that I was talking about, like trampling through. Maybe it was like, I don't know. Maybe they couldn't have figured that out. Who knows? But yeah, that wasn't mentioned at all.
When they ran right past her body.
Apparently, just the most incompetent people. Okay, main theory, number one, however it happens, the theory is that Christina killed herself. The other theory is that she was murdered, of course. So here's some evidence for the murder. Before they got married, Jack arranges for 2 life insurance policies. One for him, one for Christina. There was also, so the policy was like 500 Canadian dollars on each of them. And then there's also a double indemnity clause so that if they die accidentally, the amount gets doubled. And guess who's the beneficiary on both of those life insurance policies?
Is it Ronald?
It 100% is. It is Ronald, the friend.
Interesting.
This is so stanky.
Even stankier, there was also an insurance policy on the fucking cottage.
Are you serious?
Ronald's cottage. And guess who was the beneficiary on that insurance claim?
Was
Weirdly,
it also
Jack.
Ronald?
It was Jack because it was Ronald's policy, but Jack was the beneficiary.
Oh my god.
What a tangled web. Wait, it wasn't. I assume it was actually Ronald, right?
Wait, what?
I assume it was actually Ronald, the beneficiary of the insurance policy on the house.
No, Jack was the beneficiary.
It actually was. I was making a joke about how silly it would be for it to be Jack when both of the life insurance policies. I didn't know I was going to be right.
No, you were actually 100% correct. That's okay. Now I get it. I'm like, we're not. What is going on? Like, okay, we're just talking about 2 different things.
No, I thought I was being hilarious when in fact it was actually correct.
You were right, yeah.
All right, so this is pretty fucking fishy, these insurance policies and this friendship. I think I'm going to put some air quotes on friendship. Because due to all of this, it does kind of seem like there might have been some kind of relationship beyond, like, friendship. Whether they were all in a relationship together, whether Ronald and Christina were in a relationship, or if Jack and Ronald were in a relationship. Jack does confess to authorities during the inquest that he did have an intimate relationship with Ronald. But then when they go to trial, he says that he was coerced into making that statement.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, wouldn't be the first time, but also not the safest time to be gay.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, you can't really blame them for wanting to hide that fact. But I am upset that they did all of this weird shit with insurance. Like, it's just so seedy. And, like, I mean, that's the other theory. That's that she was murdered because of her involvement in this, like, kind of fucked up love triangle.
I mean, I don't know. That one's hard because it's like easy to say like, oh, they were in love with each other, so they offed her. But like, it sounds like it was extremely complicated.
Yeah, I think it was more complicated than just that, if that's what happened. So Jack does get remarried 3 years after the tragedy, and he has some kids with this woman, and they do live in the house that he shared with Christina for a little bit. And I guess he just like never talked about Christina again. He just like didn't want to bring it up. I read an article that some of his family members were interviewed, and they were just like, yeah, it was just this dark hole in his life that nobody would even ask him about. Ronald apparently just like moved to New York City in 1956. He gave away his dog and was never heard from again.
What?
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. And just to add to the devastation, Christina was only like 22 years old when she was found dead.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah. So happy times. That's the 8-day bride.
Oh my.
That one's a brain scratcher.
I feel like I need to know 1,000% more about her death.
Yeah. Like, I want to read the autopsy report.
Yeah. Because they determined it was drowning, correct?
And she had codeine in her system. That was like kind of the only 2 big facts that I can recall from the autopsy.
Yeah. So my thought is like, are they calling it drowning because they found her in water, or was there like fluid in her lungs that implied that she inhaled it and drowned?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how advanced mortuary science was in finding cause of death
Yeah,
at that point
exactly.
too. So it's just like, so convoluted, and it's just sad.
Yeah. I feel like there's evidence that it could go either way, that, because everything you said, those letters that are supposedly written by her, even though, kind of like Sam said, handwriting analysis can be not the most perfect science, but like all of those letters make you think, there's something going on with her. But as we've heard on this podcast and every other fucking true crime podcast, the second that there's insurance policies that come into play, that's when it starts to reek to high heaven to me.
Oh yeah, always.
A great way to cover the fact that you took out an insurance policy on your spouse would be to take one out on yourself at the same time.
Exactly.
They're like, no, we did this for everybody.
Yeah, everyone's getting one.
Everyone's getting one.
But not Ron.
Not Ron.
No, he's just the beneficiary of all of them.
I know. Because wouldn't you, if it was just for themselves, wouldn't you make the beneficiaries each other?
They
like
did.
She would be his and you.
Oh, the couple,
But
the
I
married
thought-
couple. Yeah,
The couple.
Yeah, that would make
The
sense.
people who were supposed to be in love with each other.
Yeah.
Them.
That would make sense.
I love that they sort of traded it off. Like, Jack doesn't want the insurance policies to look suspicious, so Ronald is the beneficiary of that. And Ronald doesn't want it to look suspicious that he took out insurance on his own house, so Jack's the beneficiary of that.
Yeah. Oh, the house that just so happened to burn to the ground the same day that Christina died. I wonder what that means.
Yeah, the one day that I happened to leave and go sit in the sun.
Yeah, and go sunbathing, and then and everything's fucked.
That damn sun burned my house down with my bestie's friends inside.
Yeah. With my lovers inside.
I mean, was this a cabin like in woods? What sort of environment are we looking at around it?
Well, it was so remote you had to get to it by boat only.
So they were alone, I would guess.
There probably weren't a ton of people around.
I mean, I'm wondering if there is an option of like she left the cottage alive and for some reason lingered out in the woods if there are woods around before she ended up. I'm imagining a woodsy scenario, and I don't know if
There's
that's
woods, but
justified.
there's also beach, I think,
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. There's got to be beach if there's water.
Yeah. I'm wondering if she like went somewhere else and ended up staying away while people were around and then ended up on the beach.
Yeah, but then how did she end up face down in the water? Like,
I mean, every time I take a flight of stairs, I'm like, this is the flight of stairs where you trip and you die. So, like,
oh my God, yeah.
I have that thought every time I get on stairs. So at least one person in the world has to have that embarrassed trip and fall into a puddle.
I know, and I guess if you're on codeine, you just don't get up because you're comfortable. But like, I don't know. I have also beefed it downstairs. All believable. I've fallen flat on my face over nothing. Was she wearing tall shoes?
She was wearing a nightgown, so I don't think so.
Excuse you, you can find me walking around my house in my nightgown and 7-inch stack. And that's how I'm gonna beef it.
That's good for you. I'm so happy for you. What?
I'm out here haunting my own apartment, okay?
Well, Sam, thank you so much for coming back. And I'm sure there's something you want to plug before you go.
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be back after so long and getting to listen and getting to hear it grow. It's been so fun.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I'm now like a big time streamer.
Yeah,
it's
things
not big
have
time.
fucking changed.
It's not big time, but I do stream on Twitch. I do original TTRPGs every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time.
And those are tabletop role-playing
Those
games,
are tabletop
right?
role-playing games. I also stream. I do kind of random stuff on Mondays, depending on what sort of the vibe is. That might be expanding. We'll see. But you can find that at twitch.tv/SamSam. I know what you're thinking. I can spell that. You can't, because I couldn't get the nice version of it. It's SAAMSSAAMM.
You know that your screen name is my dyslexic nightmare, right? Like,
I can barely spell it the right way. When I got it like 2 years ago, I didn't think I was going to be doing any streaming. I thought it was just to harass my friend Dan, but now it's turned into something else. I keep trying to get the real spelling and it's still not available. So maybe that'll happen. I was going to say on there is my Twitter and Instagram stuff too, which I could also spell out. But here's the Instagram handle. If you can figure out how to accurately spell for Instagram TV's hit supernatural drama Hot Angel, and you can find that page on your own, then like follow me and message me and tell me that you figured out how to spell it, and I'll send you $20. But you have to tell the truth.
Sam, don't say
You
that.
have to tell the truth, and I'll know if you're lying about just going to my Twitch page and clicking that way. I can tell. But you should click through and follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and then watch games. Games of which Sophie and Katelyn have both played.
That's right. It's just so fun.
Sam creates custom games inspired by suggestions from your following. On Twitch, they give suggestions at the end of every stream, and then Sam creates a custom tabletop role-playing game based off those suggestions for people to really play, and it has been so much fun. We've played with multiple people. Sam and I went on a solo journey through ancient Greece.
Mm-hmm. We met our best friend, Dookie.
We met our best friend, the monster Dookie. It's always a fun time. I highly suggest checking it out.
That's my big thing going on right now.
Yeah. And my other question for you is, what's your favorite bone right now?
Oh, yeah, because the last time I was on, this question didn't exist. So I've never had a favorite bone. I think it's the sternum.
Yeah, very protective.
I think I'm a sternum girl.
Sternum girl.
You know, they talk about tit men, ass men, but I'm a sternum girl.
Sternum girl. It's just so important.
Honestly, same.
It's so important.
Sternum girls and sternum boys and sternum non-binary folks. If you enjoyed today's episode, or any other episode for that matter, please go rate and review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you can put some stars next to anything bones.
And tell a friend.
We love that. We love friends. And yeah, have a good day. Appreciate your bones, please.
Yeah, check out our Instagram and website. And we love you so much. Are you guys ready?
Bone.
That was a disaster. I love you guys.
Nailed it.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Anything Bones. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Anything Bones Podcast, or email us at anythingbonespodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you to Nick Kruger for our spooky music and Stephen Vetteroff
At Chubby Scrubby on Twitter,
for our jazzy vocals, and thank you to Camilla Franklin
at Camilla Strader on Instagram.
for our beautiful bony artwork. Please rate, review, and subscribe.
Applebee's is Satan's favorite fast casual eating spot.